Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The seminar is about to begin.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, that's better. So, we've been doing this seminar for the last couple of years, and it's been well received, so we're going to continue. And we're very honored today to have with us Acting VA Secretary Peter O'Rourke and House Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Dr. Phil Rowe. VA Secretary nominee David Wilkie had hoped to be joining us, but his Senate confirmation was just a little too late to get him here. So Acting Secretary O'Rourke stepped up, and we're very appreciative. He did a great talk to us this morning, as you know, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say this afternoon in our seminar based on the questions we'll be asking. Dr. Phil Rowe, Chairman Rowe, I got to tell you, I've been working with him over the last couple of years and his staff. He's been a huge champion of veterans benefits, veterans legislation, and we couldn't have gotten the legislative pieces done without his leadership. He has been a true champion of the legislation that we have supported. So, saying that, we're not going to ask for questions from the audience. The questions have already been developed. Our moderators will be asking those questions. Our own National Service Director, Jim Marzalek, and our National Legislative Director, Joy Elam, will be the moderators. Over the past 12 months, there's been a tremendous amount of progress on veterans policies, especially with the signing of two historic new laws, the VA Mission Act and the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act. VA is now implementing both of these laws that will reform veterans' health care and consolidate VA community care programs, develop a long-term plan to modernize and realign VA hospitals and clinics, expand the caregiver assistance program to veterans injured pre-9/11, and implement a new system for processing appeals that will be quicker and fairer to appellants. Yet there are still many other critical issues facing veterans and the VA that we will be discussing today, including funding for VA health care and benefits, protecting and expanding veterans benefits, and women veterans, homelessness, mental health care, and suicide. Now, I know that we will give them the respect and the hospitality that the DAV is famous for. These are very busy men that have taken time out of their schedules to be here with us today to answer these questions in a candid and forthright way. So let's give them a big round of applause and a welcome. Jim?
Thank you, Gary. We are pleased to have Acting Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Peter O'Rourke, join us today. Secretary O'Rourke brings a highly diverse skill set in transformation, innovation, and leadership honed over 27 years of demanding fields and challenges. Secretary O'Rourke served in the military as a Navy enlisted plane captain and an Air Force officer. He has held numerous senior positions in consulting and government service, including as a senior policy advisor, congressional staffer, and executive director for a nonprofit. Secretary O'Rourke previously served as VA Chief of Staff from February through May 2018 before being appointed Acting Secretary, and was instrumental in finalizing VA's electronic health record modernization contract, as well as working with the White House, Congress, and VSOs to secure passage of the VA Mission Act. He previously served as the first Executive Director for VA's Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection, where he established and led the new office. Secretary O'Rourke is a 1998 graduate from the University of Tennessee and the United States Air Force Institute of Technology in 2005. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Acting VA Secretary Peter O'Rourke.
And I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Phil Rowe, Chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, who is now in his 5th term in Congress representing the 1st Congressional District of Tennessee. A native of Tennessee, Dr. Rowe earned his medical degree from the University of Tennessee in 1970. Upon graduation, he served 2 years in the United States Army Medical Corps, attached to the 2nd Infantry Division at Camp Casey, South Korea. Dr. Rowe ran a successful OBGYN practice in Johnson City, Tennessee for 31 years, delivering close to 5,000 babies. In 2003, he was elected to the Johnson City Commission, serving as vice mayor and later as mayor. In addition to serving on the Veterans Affairs Committee, Chairman Rowe also serves on the House Education and Workforce Committee. As a physician, Dr. Rowe has become a key player in the effort to reform our veterans' healthcare system, and also is the co-chair of the House GOP Doctors Caucus and a member of the Health Caucus. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to House Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Dr. Phil Rowe. Before we get started, we have 2 special greeting videos today. The first one is from Chairman Johnny Isakson and Ranking Member John Tester of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, followed by one from Senate Veterans Affairs Committee member and Nevada Senator Dean Heller. Play the video, please.
I'm United States Senator Johnny Isakson from Georgia. I'm a veteran, and I'm proud to be the chairman of the Committee on Veterans Affairs in the United States Senate, and I'm proud to be joined by John Tester, my ranking member and a great member of the United States Senate. We bring you greetings to disabled American veterans for the work, and thanks for the work you've done to promote the Mission Act, which John and I just completed in the Senate not long ago. This is the act that delivers all the things the VA has needed for some time to end the bad stories, uplift the good stories, and make sure health care for our veterans is good, it's accountable, and it's always available. We need your help. You need to be as enthusiastic as a patient and a user of the system as you have been in passing the Mission Act. The first 6 to 12 weeks will be critical from a standpoint of the Mission Act. Your support will make it happen. Chairman Rowe from the House is in the audience today. He'll tell you about the great job they did to pass it in the House. I will tell you, without John and the work of our committee in the Senate, we couldn't have passed it. And without your support, it wouldn't have happened. But now that it's happened, as I told the President's designee, Mr. Wilkie, for Secretary of the VA, there will be no excuses anymore. VA has the money, it has the rules, it has the direction, it has the support, and we have their back. We're going to see to it happens for you because of all you did for us. We thank the disabled American veterans of the United States. Thank you for your leadership. God bless all of you, and a happy 4th of July.
I'm John Tester, U.S. Senator out of Montana and ranking member on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here with Chairman Isakson. He's been a great leader for the last year and a half that I've been able to join him in leadership on Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. We've done some good work in the committee. We've done some good work in this Congress as far as supporting our veterans in this country. The VA Missions Act was the last piece of a big puzzle that dealt with accountability, dealt with the backlogs, dealt with making sure we can hire folks, docs and nurses, mental health professionals within the VA. It is really up to the DAV now to help push this envelope forward. As Johnny said, no more excuses. We've got to have a VA that works for our veterans, and especially for our disabled veterans. So we need your voices to be heard. We need your voices to be loud, as I think the VA is at a crossroads. And if we don't have the veterans speaking up, helping us direct the VA, and you directing the VA in the direction they want it to go, I think it'll be a big mistake long term. So you're important, as all the VSOs are, you may be the most important, but it's really important that you make sure your voices are elevated and that people are listening to the needs of the disabled veterans out there. In closing, I'd just like to say it has been indeed a pleasure for me to work with the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, Johnny Isakson. This is a great man. And together, we're going to continue to work for you and other veterans across this country to make sure that this country lives up to the benefits that you've earned.
Hi, I'm Senator Dean Heller, and I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in person today, but I wanted to welcome you to my home state of Nevada. Thank you for choosing Reno for your annual convention, and to all of our veterans in attendance, as well as our Gold and Blue Star families, I want to say a special thank you for your sacrifices. For nearly 100 years, the DAV has been one of the most effective advocates for America's heroes. With 6,500 members in Nevada, I've worked closely with many of you to tackle issues ranging from PTS to claims backlog. As the co-chair of the Senate VA Backlog Working Group, I relied on your input to write and pass into law legislation to eliminate the disability claims backlog, which has been reduced by 85% since 2014. As a senior member of the Senate VA Committee, I've had the opportunity to be a strong voice for Nevada's 300,000 veterans. Since I've been in the Senate, 40 pieces of veterans legislation that I either authored or helped introduce have become law. That includes the VA Mission Act. Thanks to VSOs and the leadership of Chairman Isakson and Ranking Member Tester, we passed this landmark legislation that gives veterans the decision-making power that they deserve to get the care that works for them on their schedules near their homes. It also expands the VA Caregivers program to all eras of veterans. This was a top priority of mine and my Nevada Veterans Advisory Councils. But there is still a lot that needs to be done, and I look forward to continuing our work together to support every veteran, their families, and survivors.
Let's get right into it. As Gary said, today's seminar will be a conversation with two of the nation's most important leaders on veterans issues. It will be a chance for us to discuss the challenges facing veterans and talk about solutions. We'll begin by asking our two special guests to offer some opening comments about the future of veterans' health care and benefits, and then we'll start our discussion. First, we'll hear from Secretary O'Rourke. Secretary O'Rourke?
Well, thank you again for the invitation to be with you all and to answer some questions, just like we said, candidly, and have a discussion. Since I talked to you guys this morning, I'm not going to make too long a conversation right now, but thank you again for what you do, and really appreciate being here.
Chairman Rowe, the opening
I'm going to
remarks.
stand up.
Great.
If you don't mind. First of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And, you know, I'm a member of the United States Congress, where we only have a 10% approval rating, so I'm glad to get invited anywhere. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I spoke to the speaker the other day. There are actually three things that poll worse than we do. Lindsay Lohan, meth labs in North Korea, and I'm not so sure about North Korea anymore. So I appreciate that, and I saw where the secretary came. He had like 4 or 5 staff, 3 security. I brought my security with me in the front row, which is my wife. So when she stand up, that's Corinda. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank all the leadership of my staff wrote me a really nice speech, and I'm going to not read that to you. I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what my experience has been in the VA committee. And I want to start by giving a shout out to your DAV leadership. They are really tremendous advocates for you all in Washington. I know you're all over the country, but these folks do an amazing job in advocating for our veterans. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is the home of the 101st Airborne Division, as you know. During the Vietnam War, I was in college then. My scoutmaster, First Sergeant Thomas E. Thayer, I'm an Eagle Scout, was killed in Vietnam in 1965. So it made an incredible impression on me. I never, ever dreamed, after practicing medicine 31 years in Johnson City, Tennessee, that I would end up in the U.S. Congress. But when I did, I asked then Leader Boehner, would you put me on the Veterans Affairs Committee? I'm a doctor. I've done some of my training in the VA hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, where I went to medical school. I also have seen VA patients in private practice, and I just think it's a perfect spot for me, and I am a veteran, so he placed me on that committee, and I've been there. And in 2009, when I got there, there were almost 100,000 homeless veterans, 1 million claims backlog. And at that point in time, we as a nation were spending about $97 billion on VA claims, on health care, and on cemeteries. The president's ask this year is $192 billion. It's doubled. And I want to put that in perspective for you. We spend more money on our nation's veterans than every other nation in the world put together. And that's a good thing. And since I have been in the U.S. Congress, I've had the Canadians, the Ukrainians, and the UK come to me and say, what are you doing for your veterans? We would like to do something also. So when I was able to get the chairmanship after Chairman Miller, whom you all know, this a year and a half ago, we set our sights on some things and asked the secretary, what do you need to do to help this a great, huge organization? It is an enormous organization. When I got in the Congress, we had 250,000 employees at VA. Now it's close to 370,000. There are more people working for the veterans in this country than work in the U.S. Navy right now on active duty in the Navy. So I looked at it and said, what do you need? And he said, well, I have to have the ability to terminate poor performing employees. We know that most employees, I've got a large number of friends that work at our VA Medical Center Mountain Home in East Tennessee where I live. It's not a mile from my home. But there were some that weren't doing the job, so I needed to be able to terminate poor performing employees. And so we passed the Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act. And we're going to have a hearing on it next week. Second piece of legislation last year we got on has just been the appeals modernization. When you have, and I want to just say his name here because he's one of the best friends I'll ever have in my life, Phil Street. If I played a round of golf, and his name was Phil, my name was Phil, is good shot Phil, bad shot Phil, but he served in Thailand, and his base was sprayed around the perimeter. Some of you men and women may have been there too. And I understand why, because they were being attacked from the outside. So they sprayed that with Agent Orange. He got a tumor, a very rare tumor. We think that was associated with Agent Orange. He was treated, didn't get better. We put his claim in then. He died. I did the eulogy at his funeral, one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And it took me 2 years to get his widows the benefits. That's wrong. It had to change, and that's one of the reasons that pushed me so hard to get this new bill through, which I think is working. I've heard stories today of how it is. A third thing that I am very much proud of that we did was the Forever GI Bill. And by the way, I've got to tell you all at DAV, I have an American Legion pen. I expect to leave with a DAV pen before I get out of here. So anyway, I used the GI Bill in 1975 when I got out of the Army. I am grateful to this day that my country invested in this young person $300 a month for 2 years. I had a young family and a child on the way, and I'm appreciative of that to now. It helped me at that time very much, but it sunsetted at 10 years. And we know post 9/11 it sunset, the bill sunsetted at 15 years. Today, that is a lifetime benefit. Number two, if you've taken a round, if you've shed blood for this nation, and you've earned a Purple Heart, you get the Forever GI Bill. Look, I tell everybody, now I look around this room and I see a lot of people. I know you're like me because I know you're getting older because I keep getting these unsolicited emails for the walk-in tub. I don't know about you, but I know you probably are getting them like I am. But I look a lot of fellows out there, I'm looking, and you look about my vintage, and I actually volunteered myself. I volunteered one day to go to the mailbox, and I got a draft notice. That's how I volunteered. And I didn't serve with them reservist or guardsmen. They just drafted however many people they needed back then. Today, those men and women serve right alongside the active duty people. I've seen them in Afghanistan, the numerous trips that I've been there. They now earn benefits that they should have, and so do our Gold Star folks. We funded the Choice Program 3 times to the tune of almost $6 billion last year to provide health care outside the VA. We then been mentioned, and I will very briefly go through the Mission Act, the VA Mission Act, and I will tell you one of the things that pushed me so hard to do that. And my wife was on this trip. I had never been, But the cemeteries and battle monuments are under my committee. And we hadn't had a committee visit in 10 years. So we went to this just about 2 months ago to Flanders Field, to Belleau Wood, where the Marines fought so gallantly in World War I, to Normandy. And I looked at Belleau Wood, at marble walls of hundreds of men who were never identified at all. They didn't come home. Their families don't know what happened to them. That happened June the 6th, 1918. 26 years later, to the day, June the 6th, 1944, young men again were fighting in a war, and we saw thousands of crosses. And I thought I was on that cell phone working back home at odd hours to get the VA Mission Act patch, which does the following. It provides a way we get rid of the 30 days and 40 miles. I want the veterans to get the best health care they can get anywhere in the world, whether it's in the private community or in the VA hospital. And so we did that. We eliminated 7 different ways. You got non-VA care now. There's one way you'll be able to do it. And Director O'Rourke will be talking about it. He and I will be talking about that. We've also created a tract in there for the caregiver program. As you know, catastrophically injured veterans post 9/11 have a caregiver program. That did not occur for veterans of my era in World War II in Korea. We've corrected that wrong. And thirdly, in that bill was what's called, and I want to go into more detail after I finish my opening remarks, about what I envision a modern VA hospital and a modern VA healthcare system looking like. I was in Medford, Oregon not long ago with Greg Walden, who is a good friend, who's chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and he has veterans that have to drive 5 hours from where he lives in his congressional district. The square miles of his congressional district are larger than the state of Tennessee. So we had to try to devise a system, a modern healthcare system that fits today. And I have no idea, with the advances that medicine's making, what it's going to look like in the future. And one last thing before I sit down, and I will tell you, there was one issue that had been burning a hole in me since I had been in the U.S. Congress, and that's the Blue Water Navy issue. We'd gotten Agent Orange presumption for everybody except our Blue Water Navy folks. And I'll mention a couple of other things. And we had tried to pay for it. We'd done it. I will give my staff a 100% shout out. This bill is fully paid for, and we passed it 382-0 out of the House. And it is now in the Senate, and I've been assured that before that we get ready to go home in October to run for re-election, everybody will, that it will be signed into law by the President. I take great pride in that, and I think that we should also. I want to finish, before we take the questions, and just finish by saying this. You hear all the time about how the Congress is dysfunctional and how terrible it must be in Washington, D.C., and I want to just tell you one thing about myself. I said, here I am. I never thought, I was a country boy, grew up in rural Tennessee on a farm. I never envisioned one day that I would get to go to the capital of the freest, greatest nation on the face of the earth. Every day I get to go there and work to better the people that provided that, the veterans of this nation. So thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for what you do, and thank the VA, DAV, and God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, Chairman Rowan. We appreciate the kind comments, and we appreciate working with your staff and you, the many meetings over the last year, with the compromise coming together with the Mission Act, and always being open, always being willing to negotiate and make it the best bill possible for veterans. So we appreciate that. We will begin with Secretary O'Rourke. A question for you. Although you've been in this position for only a short time, you came in at a critical point to help push the VA Mission Act across the line. This landmark law is expected to improve access for veterans by creating integrated networks of VA healthcare system and community partners, while maintaining VA as the primary provider and coordinator of care. Can you talk about how the VA Mission Act will improve healthcare delivery for veterans and update us on the implementation phase now that the law has been passed?
Sure. I think it's just like what Chairman Rowe mentioned. I mean, this puts the veteran in charge of his or her health care in a way that we've not had in the past. From an implementation standpoint, we have started working from day one on things, everything from access standards to market assessments, all the pieces of what's actually going to build the foundation of then the execution of that, of all the different parts of that bill. We are, as Chairman Isaacson said, that first 6 to 12 weeks is very critical. So we have teams that are briefing up status to me each week on what their progress is so that we can make sure that we don't lose any momentum no matter what else is going on around the VA or the normal day-to-day activity that we have. So I'm confident that we have the right team there working those issues. They're not easy issues. I don't think anybody expected this to be just a, we got a bill, now it's just going to roll out, it's all going to be easy. These are some things that we have looked at hard over the years. I know that both our chairmen have, both our authorizing and our appropriators have looked at this. They know the challenges of it as well, and we're going to work together to make sure that this happens.
Great. And Chairman Rowe, I think one of the things the Secretary just pointed out that was really critical that our membership would, I think, want to hear a little bit more about is that provision in the bill that really does make it a collaborative decision between the veteran and their clinical provider, because we know there can be so many circumstances. So rather than this 30-mile or 30 days, 40 miles, that there would be a real collaboration between, what the needs are for that veteran and how serious they are, how urgent they are. So would you like to expand on that at all?
Yeah, first of all, Joy, thank you, and to the Secretary, we passed, and the VA now has, I think one of the most transformative pieces of legislation in VA history. It can be that, or it can be just another piece of paper. It's going to be one or the other, but it can be transformative. As American healthcare is changing, the number of people in a hospital actually peaked in 1981. The population's grown 40% since that time, and we have 10% less people in a hospital than we did almost 40 years ago. Why? Because the technology has changed. I'll just use myself as an example. I'd never had a major operation in my life. I'd done thousands of them, but I had two in the last 24 months, two major surgeries. One, a cancer surgery, and the other was a back surgery, and I spent less than 48 hours in the hospital for both of them. So that's how things are changing, and we're looking at the American Association of Medical Colleges. I taught in medical school as a clinical faculty member for 25 years and in Johnson City, and we have staffing shortages both at the VA and in the private sector. So what we have to do is, where those shortages exist in VA, is to marry those, and that's what he was talking about, the Secretary was talking about, a market assessment. What he's meaning is, we're counting noses. VA doesn't have enough cardiologists here. Maybe we partner with a local group so that there's no gap in coverage for a veteran who has a cardiac need or whatever they may be. So that's the whole idea, is to use the best of both worlds to provide the top quality care for the patients.
Great. Appreciate that. And I know, Chairman Rowe, you were instrumental in crafting the VA Mission Act, and particularly in developing the compromise that gained broad bipartisan support and was backed by more than 36 veteran service organizations, including DAV. And although VA has always relied on private community care to fill these access gaps, there are still some critics of the VA Mission Act who argue that the law would push VA towards privatization. So I'd like you to try and expound on that in terms of, do you believe that this law will lead to privatization or dismantling of the VA healthcare system?
Well, I said this in sort of as a joke when I was at a hearing one time. I said, if we're trying to privatize it, we're doing a damn poor job if we go from $97 billion to $192 billion. So I don't think that that's happening at all. I think you have a commitment from the Congress and from the various service organizations. It's proved to be a very, very, very good healthcare system. There are some gaps in there that need to be filled in, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. I don't think anybody has any idea of privatizing it. our VA at home, we actually started a medical school. People here don't know, and I'm not going to get too far in the weeds, called the Teague Cranston Bill. We were one of the fortunate 5 centers in the country that got to do this. So I got to see a medical school start on a VA campus in 1980 and got to be on that faculty. And I watched how it improved the care of our veterans at home, and now we have a 5-star rated VA Mountain Home Medical Center in Johnson City, Tennessee, and it's a great place to provide care, and I think I want to provide that service to veterans all over the country.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, would you care to make any comments on that?
I hear that a lot as well, as like the chairman. I've never, to be honest, been able to understand that. Every VA I go to provides amazing services for veterans, and I don't know where that would come from, where we would want to do anything to jeopardize that special thing. Filling the gaps is one thing, but having something that we can recognize in America as a foundational capability that we have, because the VA just does so many other things other than even just the day-to-day care. I mean, we lead the nation in things like telehealth. We're teaching others how to do that, and when we look at shortages that are coming, we need somebody that can show that way. When it comes to prostate cancer, I mean, we've got some of the cutting-edge research of that going on, partnerships, strategic and otherwise, with folks like the Prostate Cancer Institute, and putting together strategic partnerships with IBM Watson, doing advanced artificial intelligence around finding new cures. That's the VA. I don't know where that would go if we didn't do that. So I don't subscribe to that. I work every day trying to make sure that we have the best delivery, and then that provides us the opportunity to do a lot of other things for veterans and, frankly, the rest of the United States.
Joy, one other comment about that is when I wrote this bill, I live in rural America, in rural Appalachia is where my home is. But we had to try to fashion a bill that met a very diverse country. When you have a one congressional district in Oregon is bigger than the state of Tennessee, that you've got to try to write a bill that fits rural America and urban America. And we know that we're very lucky where we are. As I said, I have a VA Mountain Home Medical Center not a mile from the house I lived in for 34 years. So we were fortunate where we are. Not every place is that fortunate. And if you're in rural Montana or South Dakota, you may have to travel a long way if you're a veteran. We've even thought of innovative ideas about maybe in rural places like that where you take a hospital, a community hospital, and designate a wing of it as a VA and establish a VA center there. And I'd like to see a pilot program started to do that. So you help not only the local community, but you help your veterans too. They don't have to go so far for care. And I will tell you, in my opinion, one of the best things the VA has ever done are the outpatient clinics, over 800 of them in the country, the CVOCs. And that's taken the care to the veteran. The other thing that the asset review that I did, if you look at the demographics of the country now, people are moving from the north and northeast part of the country to the south and west. So the VA has got to be more nimble about where the veterans are. You want to put the facilities, the bricks and mortar, where the veterans are actually living. And that's what's going, well, it's actually going on with more than just veterans. People are moving south and west.
Yep. Well, I'm hoping those responses will alleviate some of those fears. Certainly, we've seen the dedication and the funding to VA, the continued, with the IT system coming in, which I hope you talk about a little bit more, but all these investments in VA, our members, you're speaking to the choir, but they're users of VA, they volunteer, they work, they use VA, and it's so critically important to them, as you know. So it's very good to hear that we've got the support to make sure that VA is the very best it can be, and that access to community care is for a gap, to fill those gaps where needed. And like you said, in a very diverse population across the way, both in rural and in the urban centers. So thank you. Well, Jim, we'll turn it over to you for a couple of benefits questions.
Thanks, Joy. Secretary O'Rourke, although the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act of 2017 that DAV strongly supported won't take effect until February 2019, VA has operated a pilot program called Rapid Appeals Modernization Program, or RAMP. Can you update us on how RAMP program is doing and talk about whether VA and the Board of Veterans Appeals will have all the regulations and administrative processes ready to begin fully operating the new appeal system this coming February?
Sure. So I'll reiterate what we talked about this morning. We're highly confident that we'll be ready in February of next year. We've had teams across VBA working with not only groups like DAV and all the other VSOs. As you may know, this is actually a pretty sensitive issue for me, considering that we actually started this. I actually helped with the VA and with DAV and several others all the way back in 2014 as we started this journey, and to see it result in what it has is, I guess you could say, personally satisfying. But as I said, we do have RAMP. We've had, like we talked about, 33,000 veterans opt in for that as part of a pilot, as a test. We had some idea to do that sort of limited at first, and then we kind of just asked the common sense question of, well, if it works, why are we not just opening it up? So we did broaden that aperture to let more and more folks in, and I think the results have been, almost speak for themselves, with 44,000 claims, appeals adjudicated, and over $30 million, retroactively paid. So I think those results show what's possible. We never look at that as perfection. So we're still looking at ways to improve not only RAMP, but the rest of the appeals modernization, all the other processes involved in that as we move it forward. So we're excited about that. We're still looking for input. We're still looking for our partners to help us with that. The board has been challenged in certain ways for so long, and to see that turnaround with having a permanent chairman, Cheryl Mason doing an absolutely outstanding job, and delivering results in a short amount of time. I mean, we're talking about historic levels of production at the board that we haven't seen by really just in the past year. The changes that have been made, whether they've been some IT investments that we've been able to make there with changing the way that the attorneys have to manage the cases, but then also with just the focus on setting standards, setting goals, holding folks accountable, and then moving those forward. I think everybody understood the involvement. They understood who they were working for, but when you get tied up into paperwork and things like that, you start to lose focus. And she's done a great job of refocusing that staff to say, this is a prerogative. We have to get this done. So we anticipate, we challenge the board. They are responding to that challenge. We'll see record levels of production. We're making sure that that's not just a one-off, one-year thing, making sure those processes are solid, that they're repeatable, and that we can continue to set those even higher goals as we move forward.
It's been great working with Chairman Mason and your staff, Dave McClinican.
Yep.
We've been with them every step of the way, and I think we've done very, very well. And we've really pushed RAMP because we think it's very beneficial to our veterans. And right here at the convention, we have a National Service Office operating upstairs, where we've actually opted a few people into RAMP. So if there are people in the audience that do have an appeal pending, I urge you to stop by the National Service Office upstairs to see if you're eligible to participate in this new program. The benefits and the average days pending to get a new decision has been great.
80 days.
Right, 80 days.
Yeah, well below even the standard that we had set at 125. So we're excited, and we want that to start setting the standard before. Set the expectation of even a quicker and quicker cycle time for those claims.
Right, thank you. Chairman Rowe, you were a champion and helped us really get this moved along, and I know this is another issue near and dear to your heart, and would you like to comment on how your interpretation of how RAMP's going so far?
Well, what our job is, Jim, is and first of all, you know how well RAMP is working when you do two things where I live. You walk through Walmart and you go to church. You find out then because people are stopping you and saying, my claim's not getting done. But our job on the House side is and the Senate side is to provide the resources for them to do their job. And then number two, the oversight. So every 90 days, they're coming in and reporting to the House about where we are with RAMP. In other words, how is it going? It's supposed to go live in February of 19. So far, I've got to tell you, and I would say this to the audience, if you haven't tried it, I think one of the things that it didn't, not to use a pun, to ramp up as quickly is because people knew the devil they knew, and they didn't know this new devil, whether it might be as bad or worse. It turns out it is much better. So I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't used RAMP, if you have a pending claim out there, to try that.
And I would just add one more thing, and this is what's wouldn't say beautiful about this process, but really it took the VA opening up and letting in our partners who we'd always had as partners, but really opening up and letting them become active participants with us. And that's hard in the federal government to do. I mean, we have to admit it. It's not the easiest thing to let folks in. I remember some of those earlier conversations. They weren't always that great. I don't think we all left that meeting really excited at that time, but over time we did build that. And we had relationships, but this now really ingrains us into a collaborative, cooperative arrangement to where the veterans are getting what they need. How we work it out, how your service organizations, how your veteran service officers, how VBA, VSOs and RVSRs and all these folks work together, we can sort that out. But as long as it's seamless to the veteran and transparent to them of, I'm getting what I need, then I think we've won something. I think we actually fixed something there.
And I couldn't agree more. I think that was the biggest challenge, was really getting everybody in the room and really sitting down and saying, listen, we're here to do the right thing for veterans and their families. And I think once we all said that we're all here for the same reasons, it worked very, very well. So it's great. Chairman Rowe, you mentioned the personnel and the funding. One of the main drivers of the appeals backlog, as well as the claims, has been the lack of funding and personnel to meet that rising number of claims and appeals. Do you believe VA and the board have sufficient staffing to meet the current workload, the future workload, and as the claims and appeals continue to rise, or is there a need for additional funding and improved IT to help bring those backlogs down?
Well, the IT obviously is a huge part of it, but I think the funding's there. They are hiring up, I think, several hundred more claims adjudicators. And that's a unique skill. I said the fact that you hire more doesn't necessarily mean it's going to speed it up. If you take someone who's really skilled, they can run through it pretty quickly. I know as I had operated many, many times, I got faster after I'd done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. So I think they do have the money and the personnel, and I think the results are showing that they do. And I think at the end of 2019, you're going to have a very clear picture, 18 months from now, 20 months from now, about whether it's working or not.
Secretary, would you like to comment on that?
No, I agree, and just like Chairman Rose said, I mean, we are in a hiring surge, both at the board and in certain parts of VBA. I mean, I'll be very candid. The hiring isn't the only piece of this. Just like there's productivity and there's certain production type of measurements that we need to do, and frankly, we just have to keep working on the process. Continuous improvement. Looking at your process, continue looking at the different elements of it. I think we've crossed the hurdle that we need to cross, which is all focusing on the result that we're going for, and that's a veteran with their claim. Once we got that defined and what that meant, now we can continuously go through those processes. And I think we're going to find a lot of our efficiency there, and then we can hire and go through. I mean, the chairman hinted on it. It's tough to hire in and then train. I mean, your all's program as well. I mean, you know how long it takes to get somebody up to a level of proficiency that we're all happy with. Same problem we have. And the last thing I'd want to do is just shove a bunch of new employees into a system, because you all will feel it. You're going to not see consistency from us, and you're going to see different levels of expertise in production. It's just going to frustrate things. So we have to balance that. We have to make sure that we appropriately staff up and continuously look at our process and make them easier and easier to work with and transparent to everyone involved.
All right. Thank you. Turn it back over to Joy for a few healthcare questions.
Okay. Chairman Rowe, this is, you mentioned it about the importance in the Mission Act, the Asset and Infrastructure Review section, and I know you were very involved in that. And that will lead to a comprehensive plan to modernize and realign VA's hospitals and medical clinics. So as you know, we worked with you and your staff. There were a number of changes that we recommended, which you accepted and were included in the bill, which we feel makes it a really strong bill in terms of trying to address those infrastructure needs, which have been there for some time and are very costly and had been really something that's needed to be done. Although this review won't begin for several years, what outcomes can veterans expect from the infrastructure process? And how can you assure our membership, many of who we said, use VA, count on VA, and they want to make sure they're not going to lose their benefit of being able to access VA care if a relocation or a closure of a facility. So could you just walk us through what you expect? It's a very complicated process, but that part of the bill and the Mission Act.
Well, as you know, Joy, we spent a lot of time around the table in my office
We did.
talking about this, and we wanted it to be an effort. I started my political career in a planning commission. I didn't even know what a planning commission was when I got on it, but I know that it's very important to bring all stakeholders together and get ownership in something like that. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One, and many of you out there, some of you may be from Colorado, and Secretary O'Rourke may want to comment on this, but there was a VA hospital that was started. The concept of it was started in 1999. We were going to build a hospital. I've been in the process of building 3 plus 3 medical office buildings myself. They started 20 years ago. It was a $630 million building with a $20 million, $30 million change order. That hospital, we're going to get the keys to it, I think the Secretary said, in the next couple of weeks, at about $2 billion. That's $2,000 million. They built this hospital, and it's a beautiful facility. It's 1,100 feet long. Somebody's going to get in really good shape and a lot of steps walking up and down this thing. And they had 38 primary care teams at the old Denver facility. They moved to the new Denver facility, and they have 18 primary care teams, exactly the opposite of what should have happened. I go to Fayetteville, North Carolina about 2 months ago, and they have this phenomenal outpatient clinic where you can do outpatient laparoscopic surgery, which I've done hundreds and thousands of cases of that, diagnostics with CT scan, X-ray, ultrasound, easy to walk in and out to, the accessibility, parking's great, and that is exactly what we should be going to. And in 20 years, if Fort Bragg changes and does something else, you can move because you've leased that building. So that's the reason. We're spending millions, if not billions of dollars. The VA has over 6,000 pieces of real estate. 1,100 of them are not even being used or very underutilized. And the VA hospital that we have in my hometown was opened, not as a VA, as an old soldiers' home in 1903 for Civil War veterans. That's not how medicine's practiced today. And it's changing, and who knows in 20 years how much of it you'll be able to do on your cell phone right in your living room. So the VA has to change. We're spending all this money on bricks and mortar that should be spent on patient care or disability benefits. So that's, and I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you exactly what it would look like in 20 years, but it cannot look like it is. And I'll tell you why, Joy. We can't run 2 parallel systems. We cannot afford it. We have to put our resources where we get the biggest bang for the buck.
Very important points. And I think another part of that bill, Mr. Secretary, was at least with this commission that would be developed, there would be VSOs on that commission, chartered organizations, and that was one of the points we really made because we feel this is the veterans' healthcare system, and they want to be a part of it and making these decisions and not be fearful of change, but to be embracing the changes that you said that go along with the changes in medicine that are happening. So for you, Secretary O'Rourke, how do you foresee the VSOs fitting into this process during the commission as the infrastructure review asset piece goes forward? And specifically, how can VA ensure that veterans' voices and preferences are going to be heard? I know the VA is going to be very instrumental in laying out the initial assessment of the, that part of the process.
Yeah, we'll be, even as part of our operations today, we'll be doing the market assessments as we talked about a little bit to understand the landscape. As we do those, I think that'll feed information to the commission. I think specifically to the participation of VSOs, we have worked very hard the past 18 months or so, and we have a lot more initiatives coming forward with being as transparent as possible and really trying to find ways to lead the way. It's not contradictory. While we have patient records, things that are very private, very protected. There's a lot about what we do that needs to be transparent to both our customers, both veterans, veteran service organizations. I think this is just one other example of that. I mean, as we go through and make these decisions, everyone should have confidence that all the information is on the table, everybody gets to take a look at it, and when that decision then gets made, even if there might be disagreement, but once it's made, we can all say, this is the right way we're going to go, and we're going to support it, and we're going to make sure the veterans are taken care of.
I think the communication piece is so important of that. Those of us that were around for the CARES Commission, which was the Capital Asset Review Commission that went many, many years ago, but making sure that the VSO community, the leadership of DAV, so we can pass it on to our members about what's happening. And I know built in there is going to be hopefully some opportunities for veterans to weigh in a community town hall fashion or testify, whatever. I think that will really help to make sure that they feel that they're being informed, they're a part of the process, and that this is going to be a result in better care for them down the road.
Joe, if you don't do that, it won't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. And we discussed about who should be on the panel. 3 VSO members will be on there. When you go to a community, you have to go to that community and look at it. And look, you may expand the facility in that community. You may say, after doing a review, as the secretary was talking about, you may find out that you're underutilized in a community, and you may find out that you're overutilized in another community where the veterans have moved out of. You want to have your assets where your people are.
Exactly. I think we just want to be ensured that no veteran is going to go without care because of a realignment, that there's going to be something in place for everyone, regardless of the situation, but it will be assessed based on the circumstances there, the ability to hire and retain people, as well as what's available in the community and what VA has available.
Before I forget this, and I will, we get on into this, we passed an omnibus bill, which I still have the bruises for back from March when we passed it. But buried in that bill, and I don't know how it happened to get in there, but all the state veterans' homes are now funded. I wonder how that happened. So there was a backlog of years, and we have a huge problem of aging in this nation and what we do with people aging. And I know our state veterans' homes in Tennessee are phenomenal. And that backlog has now been funded and is off the table. So I want to let the membership that probably didn't get discussed very much with the omnibus, but somehow miraculously that got in there. I don't know how that happened.
Very good, thank you. Yes, excellent. Jim, back to you.
Thanks, Joy. Chairman Rowe, over the past couple of years, there's been talk about starting a comprehensive review of veterans' benefits. Apparently, some may believe that the current benefit levels may be too expensive, particularly disability compensation. Do you believe that the Veterans Disability Compensation Program appropriately compensates veterans for the impacts of service-connected injuries and illnesses, or do you believe there's a need for fundamental change to the system?
I think it's one of those things like, Jim, like anything else, we need to continually evaluate the system to see. I know that one of the 3 things we've got to get done before this year is over is a COLA. The House is fully supportive of that, and the bill came out of the committee with that to increase by 2.6%. So that's one thing that has to be done. And then I think you just have to see and continue to evaluate whether those needs are being met. I think they are. We will never get it all exactly right for every veteran. I'll just flatly say that now. When people come in, you can't devise a system that's right for everybody. But I know the way I look at it is I came home, I'm a surgeon. I came home from Korea with my hands, my eyes, everything worked. I could carry on with my life and my career. Look, I see some people, and I serve with, and I finally got him on the committee, Brian Mast, and many of you may know Brian, who lost both of his legs and part of his hand in an IED explosion. He can't do that because of his service to the country. I can't ever compensate him enough. There's no compensation that you can do that will compensate that man appropriately, that veteran appropriately. So it's a work in progress, and certainly I know that our veterans benefits now in 10 years since 2009 when I've got on there, just the benefit part of the budget is larger than the entire VA budget was 10 years ago.
Excellent. Secretary Rourke, would you care to comment?
I mean, I would reiterate Chairman Rose. I mean, I think we continuously try to improve things when it comes to making those decisions. I mean, it's probably not my place. I mean, I'm going to take the lead and try to execute those programs as well as we can.
Right.
And that's our role to play in that.
I think working together, again, just like we did on appeals reform, I mean, getting everyone together and really talking about the issues is really how we get it done the right way.
Sure.
Secretary Rourke, in recent years, there's been a number of alarming proposals calling for reducing or scaling back veterans' benefits, whether as part of a VA budget submission, a CBO or OMB report, or another source. Would you oppose proposals in the next VA budget submission that would reduce, cut, or eliminate benefits that veterans have earned, including proposals to trim disability compensation by rounding down COLAs or to cut off individual and employability benefits for veterans above a certain age?
So our role, at least my role in this right now, is to take proposals that are made, whether they come from our committees or they come from different options when they look at us to create offsets, and we try to provide as many options and do that as transparently as possible. We have what we have to work with. I try to make sure that folks are dispassionate about that. Just people ask this question, we have to provide the scenario, and then it's up to folks to make the decision on how they want to execute that. So I just want to make sure that we honestly portray it, that it's very transparent of how we come up with those options, and then that way who the decision makers are to make those can accurately and honestly make them.
Right, transparency is key,
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely.
Right. Chairman Rowe, would you care to share your views on any of the proposals?
I will, and this is where probably I'm going to get booed, so that's okay. I've done a lot of town halls, and this has been very good. Thank you for not booing so far. On the COLA round down, I'm challenged in the House. We have had hundreds of billions of dollars of budget deficits. We have a $20 trillion debt in this country, and yet I'm trying to provide more benefits for veterans. One was the Forever GI Bill. There are many others. And until 2013, the Congress had multiple times, including every single member who's on the committee right now, had voted for the COLA round down. And it's used in for every other, like in Social Security, any other Social Security disability, all have a COLA round down. The only one that doesn't is the veteran round down. And of course, the biggest round down you could have be $11.88 a year. It could be as little as 12 cents a year to provide benefits for other veterans. So that was what we're challenged with. We have pay-go rules that we have to follow, and we try to expand benefits and still pay for them. So that's why the COLA round down, I tried to use it for the Forever GI Bill, and until 2013, when it became a political issue, it was never an issue before that. So I'll probably try it again sometime if I have another benefit, and I'm getting over the bruises from it. I'm well and healed. And the IU you talked about, certainly there ought to be, I think at some point, there were 400 and something, the last number I remember, people over 90 who applied for that. Most people are not employable after 90. So I think there are things that we need to do that are reasonable, and I'm obligated to try to pay for these benefits that we're giving. And so far, we've been able to do it with the exception, and I will say that Congress did this unequivocally, is the choice program. We did not offset that. We went ahead and said this is something we promised our veterans, and we're going to pay for it. So that's borrowed money that we paid for that with.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being candid. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joy?
Chairman Rowe, this is a question that's very near and dear to my heart about women veterans. As you know, DAV released a report, Women Veterans, The Long Journey Home, about 4 years ago now. We're going to be releasing a new report that we've been working on. That'll come out in September. And it really looks at, again, the progress that's been made over time, improving services and benefits for women veterans, trying to make sure that they're effective for meeting the unique needs of women veterans, And we know that there's legislation pending out there, and we certainly would like to know your feelings about doing a hearing on women veterans before the end of the year. I think VA has made a tremendous amount of progress, but we still want to look at where are those gaps, hear from those women veterans, and look at the findings of the research. I mean, VA's researchers are doing a phenomenal job on looking at the specific healthcare impact of military service on their healthcare. And we continue to find that they are finding new things that really, to us, translate into how we could be providing different, better benefits, better services. Would you be willing to consider, having a hearing to look at the progress that's been made? I know it's been a couple of years since that's been done. And also consider any legislation that might be warranted.
Well, on the hearing, absolutely. And one of the things that we know, the fastest growing population in veterans are women veterans now. And we all know that, look, I'm an OBGYN doctor, and my office was set up for women. That's all we saw. But the VA was set up basically for men. That's how it was set up. And I mean, nobody intended it. It's just most veterans were men when the VA system was built. And the average VA building is over 50 years old. So it's an old system, and it needs modernization. And I will give the VA a shout out. I've visited many, many medical centers and intend to do so in the next year that are now beginning to have different entrances and different clinics for women. That's absolutely what should be done. And because I think many women, when they walked in, didn't feel like that the VA, and I could see why after I walked in, it wasn't set up for them. Another issue that we've worked on, we've just done a pilot program or beginning a pilot build for a pilot program for military sexual trauma. And I think that's something that certainly relates to that issue, plus the PTSD that goes along with that. And we know that also women's suicide rates are going up. Even though it's bad in the population of veterans overall, it appears to have stabilized. And by the way, this fall, we're going to do hearings on, with all the money and resources we're spending on suicide prevention, are we making any progress? In other words, I've been to Canandaigua, where the call center is. In my home state of Tennessee, General Hastings is the commander of the Guard. Took over in 2011. The first 40 days, he was a commander of the Tennessee Guard. There were 4 suicides. And he said, something's got to stop. So they started a program called Guard Your Buddy, where you can be on the phone with a master's level psychologist in about 1 to 2 minutes. 24/7, Christmas Day included. They've dropped the suicide rate in the Tennessee Guard by 70%. I'm trying to see if that's scalable to the entire reserves and guards, because guardsmen, as you know, those systems are different, because on active duty you had a post to go to, you had people to be around. When you're on the guard or when you're in the reserves and you go home, you just go home. You're separated. Your unit may muster in Tennessee, but you may live in Kentucky or Georgia somewhere. So the answer is yes, and I think the VA is stepping up and trying to hire the appropriate personnel. It's hard. I'll give you an example. At Mountain Home, where I was, many years they wouldn't have an OBGYN specialist. Our group would function as that. And right now, one of my former group members is at the VA, and they do have a person there now, so they can provide those services at VA. So I think staffing up is a problem. But overall, I think VA is making strides. And as far as a hearing, I would love to do that. It could be a great hearing.
Great. And again, another shout out to VA, your Women Veterans Program managers, the VA researchers are so dedicated. They're doing an excellent job. We work with them very closely in terms of all of this great information that we're getting. And, I think that VA deserves the credit for really trying to change the culture, trying to make progress in this regard. So I hope that you'll continue to work with us as well, and make sure that women veterans can use VA, feel comfortable there, feel welcome, feel safe, want to get their care at VA, because there's so many specialized services that are available to them, that if they're in VA, all the wraparound services, that's what's critical, what makes the VA special. So we don't want to have to see that segment of the population, veteran population, have to seek care solely in the, in the community, but really VA embrace that, step up, and do what they can to make sure that that happens. Great. Jim, back to you.
Secretary O'Rourke, do you believe that VA accountability laws have improved the efficiency of VA operations? And how has this impacted the recruitment, hiring, retention, and morale of VA employees?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, as the chairman knows, and you guys, the Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act was passed last year, following up after the president's executive order on accountability, and I was the executive director for the office. Setting up something unique in the federal government is a great opportunity. It doesn't happen all that much. I mean, I've been in and out of federal service, and rarely do you ever get to see something new. And I've told the chairman this. I've told the folks on the Government Oversight and Reform Committee. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I don't know even if the Congress understood just what they'd done from a cultural aspect.
That happens a lot. We don't understand what we do.
But in a good way, in a very positive way, because it was the key cultural aspect that we were missing, and it wasn't just firing people quicker, although that was a big piece of it, and that's a stereotype in the federal government that I know I've learned from 18 when I was a enlisted guy. I mean, you just never fired the civilians or those kind of things, and it's not that you go off on some vendetta on trying to get them. At VA, 95% of our employees are absolutely outstanding. I mean, every single day going out and doing Herculean efforts to serve veterans, whether it's going above and beyond, working overtime, unpaid to take care of folks. I mean, I could just tell story after story that I've even heard, and I haven't been here long enough to really collect them all, but there was always something missing there, and I think everybody intuitively knew it, and I know that Congress had heard it and they'd seen it, and after 2014 when it kind of just mushroom cloud and we saw a lot of it, that accountability piece was huge, but really pairing that with the whistleblower protection piece, which seemed like a necessary but an added-on piece of that. I mean, we typically call it the Accountability Act, and I correct people. I say, no, it's the Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, even though I'd love to be able to get away from the term whistleblower, mainly because of the connotation it carries in the VA. That's overwhelmingly negative, and that's a bad thing, but it's a reality. And so what we tried to do was, and really maybe even naively tried to go into, is how do we try to solve that? And it led to a lot of different outcomes that I didn't expect, that frankly we still have a lot of work to do, but have informed us on things that we can do better from an employer-employee relationship standpoint. But really what we found is it was that outlet that they needed to tell us things like, hey, this is wrong, or I'm not able to do my job the right way, or veterans aren't being served, because these are very passionate people about what they do. I mean, I told our team when we first got here, I mean, as a group of politicals, I said, you will never have a more righteous job, no matter where you went or have been or whatever else, you won't have a more righteous job than this, because the work that you get to do touches people every day. And you make a decision, even here in DC, you make a decision or take an action, a veteran's going to know that. And I said that to embrace it. I didn't even really know all that I was getting at, but the whistleblower protection, having the ability to have employees have a safe and anonymous way to tell us what's going wrong and have us be able to address it and hold us accountable for that. That's why we were very transparent early on with the statistics about what we were seeing, the types of disclosures that we were getting, just to set the standard that this was not something we were going to hide. We weren't going to just take it and say, okay, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it, and never hear about it again. We knew for us to be successful that we'd have to be as transparent as we legally but possibly could. But I think we've learned a lot over the past year with how we can deal with the senior leader misconduct and performance. Yeah, that was a big part of it too that I think gets overlooked sometimes. And it has made a difference. It's still getting there in a sense as we develop and refine those processes, as we understand more of the dynamics and really the challenge that we have at VA. We were talking about the human resources and training people. That's not just with specific technical areas, that's with management and leadership as well. the things that we have to do. But that really, I think, along with everything else, Mission Act, appeals modernization, this is that core, it's the solid white line on the road that's going to help us with all the other things that we need to do and keep constantly making sure that we're refreshing our ability to manage people and lead people and do the right thing. So obviously I'm pretty excited about it, but it's, like I said, more work to be done, but I really, it's a testament to the vision of the Congress, to a lot of work of folks just being honest, a lot of whistleblowers that took risks that, frankly, I would hope that I would have taken in their shoes, but I don't know. I mean, that was things that really they did over and above what they were being asked to do. So testament to all of them. And I personally, and I know our team at the office, thank the Congress for that.
No, that's great. And Chairman Rowe mentioned earlier in his opening statement, 370,000 employees, right? And
370,000 employees over all 50 states, all the territories, 7 foreign countries. Yeah, it's a massive. I mean, we DoD's bigger than us, but I think we've got a bigger swath of the group.
And to comment on, you had mentioned 95, 96%, and we're just phenomenal employees, and we couldn't agree more. And as you know, our national commander recognizes someone from each business line in VA during that tomorrow. And one of the toughest parts for myself and my staff is going through all those nominations and finding, the best possible candidate, because they're all great. I mean, there's a lot of employees taking care of veterans and their families, and it's one of the things that I talk to our service officers about is the lives that they get to touch every day and how it's a privilege to get to do what we get to do. So thank you for that. Chairman Rowe, your observations of the new accountability laws, you want to share any views? I know you have a hearing coming up, I believe.
We have a hearing Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So if you're having trouble sleeping, you can watch that hearing on. No, it should be a really good hearing on, and I'm excited about having it. One of the jobs we have after we pass these bills, as I said, is to keep an eye on it and see if they're being implemented properly. And it's really good to hear what the Secretary just said, that the bill is actually more transformative than we thought it would be. Then Secretary Shulkin said he had to have this piece to be able to operate this very large bureaucratic organization, and so I'm glad to hear that those changes are occurring. And we'll hear one side of it where it's not maybe some the side that isn't so good, and it isn't, but we'll have a good hearing Tuesday.
Excellent. Chairman Rowe, we're grateful that under your leadership, the House approved Blue Water Navy legislation, and you talked about it in your opening statement. Thousands of veterans were exposed to Agent Orange offshore in Vietnam. This legislation is now pending in the Senate. We hope it will become law this year. Can you give us an update on legislation and talk about what we can do? Our membership here, they want to help. What can we help you do to get this legislation enacted into law this year?
Well, I think a couple of things, and I didn't mention in my opening statement. Not only does it include the Blue Water Navy. Look, I read the science. I don't really like politics all that much, but I like the policy, and so I decided I would deep dive on this, and I read the science that was out there. You could not. It was impossible to prove it one way or the other. So I said, if we cannot do this, and we've given this presumption. All these other veterans, there are about 90,000, mostly men out there that have not gotten their benefits, and we're treating them differently than other veterans. Let's make it right, and let's pass this. And so that's what I came down to. The other thing that we're doing now that I'm trying to get started, we're dealing with burn pits, as you know, and other issues. I said, let's start out when we deploy our military going forward to begin to collect data and begin to find out, and we're bringing a roundtable together to look at what do you scientists need to be able to make these decisions 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And with an electronic system that we're putting in place, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure, we'll be able to track this data and make accurate determinations. 524 of us Vietnam-era veterans are dying every day. And I said, if we don't solve this problem, we're going to do the same thing we did to the mustard gas World War II people. We're going to let them all die before we do the right thing. So we're doing the right thing. And what you can do, Jim, and I believe we're there. I had my staff director, John Towers, call the Senate before I left to come out here to find out where that bill was. And Senator Isaacson and Tester both want to get that out and done. And I think they can essentially UC it out of the Senate. I mean, there was no objection in the House whatsoever. Rarely do you see that. And I mean, there's usually one, but there wasn't anybody that disagreed. And I think you'll see a UC out of the Senate. And I'm hopeful by the end of September. But right here, you all can call and begin to write, and you know how to do that. This room knows how very well. They know, at least they know how to do it to me.
All right, thank you very much. Joy?
Yes, our grassroots advocacy, they're a good group. They are not shy, as you know.
They're not shy.
Secretary O'Rourke, this one's for you. The Mission Act also contained a historic expansion of comprehensive caregiver assistance program that will cover veterans severely injured prior to 9/11, which will be phased in over the next couple of years. When do you anticipate the VA will have the regulations, increased staffing, and upgraded IT systems in place so that the newly eligible veterans and caregivers can begin to apply for the benefit? We've explained to our members that, you know, some things need to be in place first for VA to implement that. So if you could talk about that a little bit, we appreciate it.
It's, I mean, obviously, we're really excited about putting this into place, but it's going to take us some work up front to make sure that we have the right rules and procedures to make that happen. The IT is what we're working on in parallel to that, although that covers a few of these different aspects of the Mission Act. So we're making that investment across the board on all of that. We've got a great team of folks that, frankly, led by Linda Davis and some other folks in our organization that are very passionate about this. And they have been our own internal advocates to make sure that we're very aware and understand the importance of that. Having served that role indirectly, I have the same thing. I have a set of in-laws that are in a state home in Tennessee, but before that, we were their caregivers as well, amongst the family members. And so it's a personal issue for us as well. But I think we're going to continue to proceed through this next year as we develop all the regulations that we need and then move to implementing the procedures. So I have no, while I get regular updates on it, I don't have any concerns today that we're not going to make it into the targets that we've set.
Great. We did mention that, you know, the expectation is, you know, if all goes well. So we're really hoping that all goes well and as planned. And, you know, it's such an important benefit for so many of our members, and they've waited a long time.
Joy, what I wanted to do, and I watched how the post 9/11 catastrophically injured veterans was. Each medical center sort of had to figure it out on their own about how to do it, and there was a lot of confusion and so forth in this rollout. And I said, for once, why don't we get it all right and then roll it out? And so that's the whole idea. So when someone applies, they'll know exactly what the benefit is. The caregiver and the care coordinator will know what the criteria are so that everybody's on the same page. And that was my hope and desire, is to make sure when we do roll this out that everyone understands who's eligible, what the criteria are, and what the rules of the road are, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And the lessons were learned from the choice implementation and trying to do something really quickly, although really needed. You know, you run into problems that just frustrate veterans in trying to get their benefits. And on the caregiver issue, I know you know how grateful we are. We know personal commitment that you made. We sent our delegation and dispatched them out to talk to you and you know, make sure the Mission Act included the caregiver provisions. And this is just a phenomenal and great step forward. But we know that there's still one category of those veterans, and we did our unsung hero. You know, we had a panel discussion, and I know that you met him, our former commander, Dave Riley, and his caregiver, and one of our previous national commanders, Denny, and his wife. And but for Dave Riley, he's still not eligible due to, it's based not on injury but illness, you know, severe illness that requires a veteran to have a caregiver. And we're really hoping, you know, we know this just passed and there's an implementation phase, but we're hoping to have your commitment to also work with us in the future to include that group. They're so deserving, and we want to make sure no one is left behind that really meets that status of a severely disabled veteran who needs their caregiver. And Dave and Yvonne, we know how much he did. He testified last year before the Joint Committee, and I think there wasn't a dry eye in the House. And he fought so hard for this, so we want to make sure that he and his spouse are included too in the going forward.
Certainly, I think as we get this rolled out and see how it does, as you've seen other VA programs as they've developed and morphed, you've included more and more recipients in there.
Well, we're certainly thankful, and our staff is willing to work with you anytime, and the same for VA. Any work group that we can participate in, we hope that you'll take our expertise and we'll, work with our membership to make sure that we have bring forth their concerns, their questions, anything they can to make it the best program possible as a rollout.
And Joy, I didn't finish a minute ago a thought I had on the Blue Water Navy. We also included about 4 years where I didn't even realize this when I was tromping through the DMZ in Korea, that Agent Orange had been used there. So that's included in the Blue Water Navy. Also in Thailand, offspring who've had spina bifida of people who served there that have the same presumption as people in Vietnam. We're going to finally get this right.
Great. That's wonderful news. Jim?
Thank you, Joy. I see we're just about out of time. We like to give both of our special guests an opportunity to make any final comments or any final statements, and we'll start with Secretary O'Rourke.
Well, I probably won't be with you next year, the secretary. but a note on that, I just want to assure DAV and the members that we're very excited about Mr. Wilkie's nomination, about him coming. Obviously, he spent a few weeks with us as the acting, and so we're looking forward to a seamless handoff and more of the same transparency, focus on veterans issues, and really getting out and talking to folks and hearing from you. So I hope you feel the accessibility from us, from not just us as a full leadership team. I know we've got the fairly new Undersecretary for Benefits, Paul Lawrence, who is going to be doing some great things with VBA and working with you all. So that's exciting, and really these whole teams. So I hope that. I hope not only that we see this, but that you all see this, and definitely call us on it if you don't, because it's really, we're not really making a difference unless we hear it from the field. So I enjoy these opportunities. I've tried to get out a lot, mainly because I have an opportunity, and most of those folks were hotel security, just by the way. So, but
I got my security.
Well, I'm leaving with you. But it is humbling. As I said this morning, I was an 18-year-old kid dragging chains across an aircraft carrier, and to be able to take care of the friends that I made then and through the Air Force, and knowing folks and knowing some of the challenges and being part of the recent conflicts and knowing the struggles that those folks are going through, being able to make a difference, like I said, it's humbling. It's honoring for me to have the opportunity to do it. I appreciate that, and hopefully you'll see that we've taken full advantage of that with the team that we have at VA and the results that we drive. Because at the end of the day, it's nice and all that, but unless we can actually deliver, we haven't made it. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, we definitely hope you're with us in some capacity, and we've enjoyed your leadership, and we look forward to working with you. And on a personal note, I want to thank you for your military service and your continued service to your fellow veterans, and same with you, Chairman Rowe. I certainly appreciate it, and I'll turn it to you for any final comments you have, Chairman Rowe.
Well, thank you, and it's been great to see. I can't believe you all sit through all this. Most of you did, when there are a lot more fun things to do outside here. But I want to thank your organization, the DAV, for the help you've given me. We didn't go into this, but this fall we're going to take a deep dive into homeless veterans on the committee. $7.2 billion we're spending as a nation. We're gonna I think with Joy's suggestion, I think have either a roundtable or a hearing on our female veterans. Certainly, are we making any dent in suicide? That troubles me more than anything. When I hear of a young person who has their entire life ahead of them in this great country take their life because of some demon that we can't help them with, that we really need to. I spent hours in the operating room removing a cancer from somebody and save one life. If you can talk somebody off the ledge or we can prevent a suicide, you have saved a life. So we're going to work on that this fall. The oversight and implementation. We didn't get into this. We didn't have time. Was on the implementation of the electronic health record. Incredibly important technology undertaking that the Secretary is going to be doing. And the reason it's so important is for me out in the private world, right now I have no way to access the medical record inside the VA. So we need to have a seamless way that we can share that information to provide quality care for veterans. So we're going to do that, and I've actually stood up along with Sergeant Major Walls, who is a ranking member on the committee, a new subcommittee just to look at technology. We're going to have oversight on just technology. It's a $16 billion program. And I want to finish by saying to you all that, you know, I never dreamed, ever thought I would ever end up in the U.S. Congress. I got to do in my life what I want to do, which is to practice medicine. And it was a 31-year wonderful career for me. I got to help a lot of people. I never, ever thought I would have a second career where I could help millions of military veterans that have served this nation. And I will tell you this from this country doctor right here. There are 3 things I will never apologize for spending money on. One, if you're a soldier in the field, I want you to have whatever you need to take care of you and your buddies. I don't care what it is, and that's why I voted to upfund the military by $70 billion this last year. Number 2, when you come home from service to this great country, I want you to have what you need. And number 3, I'm never going to apologize for supporting my farmers, my ag, because I like to eat. So that's so thank each and every one of you out there. And I think one of the things we don't do enough, we always thank the veterans. I want to thank their families. They served just like we did. And when I was deployed overseas, I had a 6-week-old son when I went in the military in 12 weeks. Next time I saw him, he didn't know who I was a year later. So I want to thank the spouses out there, men and women who serve, and I think they deserve a shout out from us veterans, that the spouses do. Joy and Jim, it's been a privilege to be here. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. On behalf of Jim, myself, Gary, and our entire DAV family, we really appreciate you taking the time, coming out here, having this discussion, sharing with our membership. I know that makes them, puts them at ease about the future of VA, their benefits and healthcare systems. We want to continue our collaboration with you, and I know Gary is in the wings here and wants to say a couple of, oh, here he comes with the pens. DAV pens. And Randy Reese too. So
You got 2 of them.
and I know as when we finish up here, they'll want us to come up front and take a few pictures, and everybody will want to take their little cell phone pictures. So if you'll please join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Get a picture all together, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Let's put you here. Joy, put you in the middle here. Put you right in the middle.
Great job, guys. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks,
All right,
thanks,
guys.
Joy.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
No, thank you so much.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
thanks
Yeah, we'll
again.
see you back in
Appreciate
town.
it. Absolutely.
I mean,
Jim, thank you. Good job.
I'll
Very much.
keep
Great to
doing
see
this,
you
but-
again.